My name is NonStopAntonio, and for the past few months, I've been watching and reacting to Cowboy Bebop, which in turn is the 16th anime I've ever watched. This series was amazing, and it's time to talk about all of it. So in this video, we will be reviewing it, talking about some of the things I like, and how I felt about the series as a whole. So let's jump into my video about Cowboy Bebop. Welcome to NonStopAntonio, where I talk about everything nerdy. I love Marvel, DC, and anime, and if you do too, I hope you enjoy this video. I think the introduction to the show is really great, setting up the music and how it's a space western, and how smooth of a character Spike is, having him pickpocket people, and also having him being really smooth talking with the first girl we meet. And I like how Jet was kind of there just to come in for backup, would cook good meals on the ship with whatever they had, and would fix up all the repairs that needed to be done. And the first episode really set the tone for this series and their bounties, because I was completely caught off guard when the dude got himself off, and that pretty much set up a trend for the entire season, with the crew not being able to get their bounties because either they died or they let them go. But that was a fun plot device that every episode you're like, are they gonna get their bounty this time? And most of the time they didn't. The introduction to Ein was really fun. I liked the second episode just because they chased Ein through the city, and how Spike just kept tripping over him, or Ein would jump at him. But in the end, Ein chose to stay with Spike and Jet. And they never really explained why Ein went with them. I'm assuming he didn't sense any evil or badness coming from Spike. And then Faye's introduction was also really fun. I feel like every time they introduced the character, it was just always a fun time. And I like how Faye mistook Spike for the guy she was supposed to meet. And it went on this whole little adventure where Faye rips them off and takes the money, and then Spike and Jet have to deal with the gangsters who end up getting themselves killed yet again. Second episode, and that's a second bad guy in a sense that gets himself killed. And I do like when Faye eventually joins the Bebop, because she was very hesitant at first, but then when they did the monkey virus episode in episode 4, which was weird, the monkey virus was a weird concept, but she joined the team and was a hero. Look, showing that she has a good heart. That was also a trend. They really like to show how these characters are good people. And this anime was also just filled with fun adventures, which I really enjoyed, because every episode was a little different. Some of them did have ties to like characters past, or they were setting up the plot going forward, but a lot of it was just like a fun adventure. They go and do something, and then they return back to the ship. But probably one of my favorite characters that were introduced was Ed, and I really liked when she was introduced as well, because she really added this weird and wacky sense to the team. And because she was a kid, it really just added like a lightheartedness to the team, and also added like a less darker tone to the show. And I really liked her character because she was a genius level hacker, and while she was around the ship, she was always a lot of fun, goofing around with Ein, and just making random comments that made me laugh. I also love Ein and Ed's bond during the show. Like I said, they were always goofing around, doing fun stuff. But when we got to episode 17, Mushroom Samba, that's where I really grew to love both of them, because they both went on their own little adventure to get a bounty and find some food for the crew. And it was so funny having Ed and Ein try to catch the bounty, find mushrooms, and then give those mushrooms and watch the crew trip out on mushrooms. It was just really fun episode, and having Ed and Ein chasing the bounty and Ed flailing her arms was freaking hilarious. And I just had a great time watching it, and it probably was my favorite episode, and just overall a good time, even though the last two episodes were fantastic. And I also really like learning about their pasts during this, because each one had some interesting points during it. So what we're gonna do next is talk about each character's past and talk about the final episodes, because I feel like there was just so much going on in this season. Like Faye's past was so interesting. Like, I was so intrigued by her past the entire season. I wanted to learn more, and we still don't know a lot about it, other than that she was like a rich girl on Earth 80 years ago. Because the first time we find out, she came out of the cryopod. She was in an accident. That was pretty much it. And the only reason she got taken out of the cryopod is because they wanted to scam her and put the debt onto her. But that was it. We didn't know much until we got the tape adventure episode, where they get a tape in the mail, and Spike and Jet go on a fun little adventure to try to figure out how to play it, because it's archaic technology to them. And I thought when Faye originally was watching right away, she was gonna get a click and we were gonna see like a quick montage of her memories. However, that never happened until Ed's the one that pointed out where those places were in the tape on Earth. So they went to go find them, and that's when her memories got unlocked. She was in an accident with her family in a space shuttle above Earth. So her past was very interesting, and I thought more would be revealed. But to be fair, she was a kid, and then she got put in cryo sleep for 80 years. I liked her past. Her past was probably one of the most interesting parts of the show, because it was so mysterious and we didn't know what was going on. And the one thing I wish we got more of was Ed's past. Like, I know she's a kid, but her past was left open. They didn't really show us much about it, other than that when we met Ed, she was on Earth. And then we finally learned about Ed's past when we learned about Faye's past. All in the same episode. Turns out she was wandering Earth for 8 years. Found her way to an orphanage, was there for a little bit, then left again and found the Bebop. And her father was looking for her for 7 years. I really wish we got to know a little bit more, like what she had been doing for those 8 years, like wandering around, what kind of hijinks she got up to, what kind of little adventure she went on. That would have been fun, but I guess you would have probably needed a second season of the show or a few more episodes to explore some of that stuff. But the two more fleshed out stories for their past was probably Jet and Spike, obviously. However, I totally thought that Jet and Spike's past were going to interconnect a little bit more because of the fact that Spike was in the Syndicate and Jet was investigating the Syndicate in the ISSP. But in the end, it didn't really interconnect. However, Jet lost his arm because his partner was working with an assassin, Unai, who was hired by the Syndicate. And that was the most thing we got out of there, where the Syndicate tried to take out Jet because he was getting too close. And then we also learn about Jet's long lost love that he tries to reconnect with. I like that episode too because it symbolized Jet moving on from her when he threw the watch she gave him away. And I like that. And also led into another tie in the final where Jet tells Spike to go see Julia, to go get the woman he lost, because he was never able to do that. And I like that. It was kind of a nice time back to his episode where he lost the love he loved once upon a time. But speaking of Spike, his past was the darkest because he came from a life of crime, a life in the Syndicate. And I really liked what they did because they always showed his past in like flashbacks, like quick flashes. Like when we first find out about it, when we first go him versus Vicious, and it was a really cool fight with a lot of action, and I really like what they did there because they would flash to his past where there's a bunch of gunfire, when he was injured. We see Julia, and it shows that Julia nursed him back to life, and we slowly learn more and more about that as the season progresses, which is what I really liked about his past, is that they kept flashing to it and then kind of having subtle hints throughout the season about what's going on and why Spike is the way he is. And then the final few episodes is what really drove us to the final and also revealed a lot more about Spike and Vicious and the Syndicate, which I thought was really interesting. But episode 24 was like that setup to the final few episodes, having Faye, Ed, and Ein all leave the Bebop, which I was a little disappointed because I didn't want to lose Ed and Ein, but them leaving was kind of like symbolizing the innocents leaving the ship so that they could go into the very dark 2 episodes for the final. And it was sad too when Ed and Ein left, and it was also sad because you see Spike looking at the bye-bye, and Spike has lost the family he made. They're gone. He never wanted the kid, the dog, or the girl, but in the end, he grew to love them all. I said that from the very beginning of the show when they introduced all the characters, that Spike was going to eventually fall in love. He gets annoyed, but he cares about them nonetheless. And it came true in the end. The last 2 episodes end with a bang, but they also end with a lot of emotional moments. Like you have Vicious going after the Syndicate, which was pretty freaking sick, and then the Syndicate going after Spike and Julia because they have connections to Vicious, which just set up a lot of death coming. Like you have Faye running into Julia, which wasn't a coincidence at all. Finding out that Julia was supposed to kill Spike a long time ago, and at the very end of the episode, I totally thought that Julia was gonna shoot Spike, and that's kind of like Spike was gonna be left there mortally wounded, and then Faye and Jet would find him and save him, or something like that would happen, but that didn't end up being the case. Spike finally gets the girl he's been wanting to find for the longest time, and they're finally back together, even though that did not last long at all. We got her, and then she died. We didn't really have a connection to her because we only got flashes to her, and then all of a sudden she was dead. So I didn't really care that she died. I just felt bad for Spike because he got the girl he loved and then she was taken away from him. I totally thought in the end of the series that Faye and Spike were gonna get together, and that never happened. But I did like learning about how Spike always lived in his past because he lost one eye and one of them was a fake. So he's always living in the moment that happened, which I thought was very interesting, and showing that he needed to go after Vicious to like lift that burden, to get rid of that, to overcome his past finally, get rid of like the last piece of it. But he did have a good moment with Jet before he left. They had a good laugh, they had some cooking, and I feel like in this moment too, Spike knew he wasn't gonna make it back, so he wanted to have one good moment with his best friend before he went off to probably die. Which the final standoff with Vicious was amazing. Having Spike literally just mow down everyone as he goes through the Syndicate base, leading to Vicious. But then when they got to that main fight at the end, it was really interesting having the guy with the gun and the guy with the sword fighting each other, and then how they have mutual respect for one another, because they drop their weapons, and instead of like Vicious picking up the gun and just shooting Spike right away, they push their weapons back to each other and continue to fight. I guess because they were brothers in arms once upon a time, they respect each other in a sense, but they're still going to take each other out, which, and then that's what happens. But Spike seemingly dies with a smile on his face, which is kind of symbolizing a burden has been lifted. He's finally moved on from his past, and he can finally be done with it now that the Syndicate's defeated and Vicious is gone. The only thing I was disappointed in was that I totally thought that the Bebop team would get together in the end, and it would be like this nice send-off with the whole team together. Especially, again, I totally thought Faye and Spike were gonna get together, and that never happened, now that he seemingly died. But overall, the series was amazing, the way they developed these characters and really gave each one their own time to shine, as well as pushing the story along, having fun adventures, but also doing stuff that pushed the characters along their arcs and made them better people. The one thing I totally thought was going to happen, that each in the characters' backstories were going to somehow connect together, because Spike and Jet were mostly like the ones that seemed like they were going to go together because the Syndicate and the ISSP. I totally thought Faye was going to be related to someone possibly in the Syndicate, and that's how she was stayed in cryopod for so long. that the syndicate was paying for her to live because I guess, you know, like her uncle or something was part of it. But that never ended up being the case. And I totally thought that maybe Ed's family would also be part of the syndicate in a way. That's why she hasn't seen her family in so long, because they left her to get her out of that life or something along those lines. But I did like where the story went, bringing people from different pasts together and giving us an interesting story that way. But the ending was bittersweet, and I feel like it's open to interpretation because we don't get to see what happens. We just see Spike fall to the ground, and he could live, he could die. He could have been saved by the Bebop crew in the end there. He could have been nursed back to health because he has had that happen multiple times and he's pretty strong. Or Spike could have died, ending the syndicate for good. But also, it could have all been a dream. And the reason I say this is because they kind of pointed to that the entire time. Because during the season, we see multiple shots with doctors, test tubes, and I thought it was part of the Mortal Kid storyline, but then it came back to Spike's storyline. So it could be saying that when Spike died, he was put in a capsule to try to bring him back, like a cryopod like Faye, and he's been living all of this in his head. It's all been a dream the entire time. The test tube and the doctors could have been Spike getting his eye replaced, but it could also be pointing out that it could have been a dream in the capsule. And on top of it, because Julia, when she died, it was all a dream. I mean, that could indicate that them being together could have been a dream they had, but then it never came true, or that this whole show was a dream. But honestly, I like kind of the vague ending. You kind of choose what you want to see. I want to believe that he survived and that the Bebop team came back together in the end. The anime was still fantastic nonetheless. I enjoyed almost every episode. I really liked what they did with the story. What did you think of Cowboy Bebop when you first watched it? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see my other anime reactions, check the description down below because I'll have them all listed. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button because it helps out the channel a lot. And I'll talk to you later.